Great. Welcome again, everyone, tonight for the next Business of Art session. Thank you all so much for being here. So as we know, the Business of Art is a free program that we started. It's an ongoing series of virtual panels, lectures, workshops to support you in building and maintaining your artistic business. And tonight we have Miss Amanda Coulson here, and she will be talking about making the connection in the art world. Now, Amanda Coulson has worked for 3 decades as a scholar, critic, curator, and cultural producer on both sides of the Atlantic, having collaborated with artists and institutions, private and corporate colleagues in the US, Europe, and various sites in the Caribbean. As an art critic and curator, she noted a lack of platforms for galleries representing emerging art. And in 2005, she co-founded the Volta Art Fairs, which takes place annually in New York and Basel. In 2011, she returned to her home in the Bahamas to take up the position of executive director at the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, or NAGB, where her focus was on increasing international awareness of the contemporary Caribbean art scene and on expanding the capacity and reach of the NAGB through a rigorous combination of capital works, collaborative projects, and the building of strong inter-island and international networks. She served on the Davidoff Art Initiative, now the Caribbean Art Initiative board from 2012 to 2018, and served on the board of the Museums Association of the Caribbean, or MAC, until she stepped down for the NAGB after a decade at the helm. She is the founding partner of TERN, a new Nassau-based gallery operated by 3 Caribbean women whose aims is to support Bahamian and Caribbean artists in telling their own stories on the global stage. So with that, now I would like to hand over to Ms. Coulson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paige. So hi, nice to meet you. I'm just going to preface this by saying I was invited by the museum to do a presentation like 3 or 4 years ago, and it's exactly the same presentation. So if you were in that thing, you're not going to learn anything new. So sorry if you were there before. Anyway, I'm going to share my screen now. And I think, can you see all of that? Yeah?
Yes.
Great. So, right. So I'm just going to basically take you through my own experience of the art world, which is quite long. I always like to use these cartoons. There's a guy called Pablo Helguera who makes something called Art Tunes, and they're very funny. They poke a lot of fun at the art world. And this is the first one, which is like, you know, art students are taught like, stop painting, go back to painting. You have to read Adorno, forget about Adorno. You're going to get tons of, you know, advice. And my advice is, again, not the word of it's just my own experience and what I've kind of observed. That's not to say that like every path is the same. And in my career, which is now like really, I'm much older than I look, you know, there are a lot of different paths in the art world. So I'm just giving like my own specifically focused view. Mine is, you know, again, I was very classically trained by John Pope Hennessy, who's the guy up there, who came from a line of like the first art historians, Bernard Barris and Joseph Devine. So I was a very classically trained art historian, went to the Institute of Fine Arts, worked at the Met, got my first job at Wildenstein and Sons, which is a very snooty old gallery doing old master painting. I got into contemporary art through collecting photography when I was very young. And then I started working at a gallery that then was called 11 Duke Street and is now called Simon Lee, which is a gallery which is in 3 locations all over the world. He's still a really good friend of mine. One of our artists that we show at TERN is actually going to have an exhibition with him in London in September. Yay! And then went to work in Italy. Look at me, young thing there at a photography gallery, which was my specialty. I then wrote for a lot of art journals. So these are all magazines that I wrote for probably about 10 years or so when I was living in Europe. Married a lovely German man, lived in Frankfurt. He owned a gallery. He operated his gallery for 10 years until he was forced to close it because his wife made him move to the Bahamas. While we were in Europe, we founded Volta, the art fair in Basel and New York, which I ran for 15 years. That's the first Volta. That's again, me looking very young and innocent up there. This is a couple of the first editions. They were very small. They only had like 20, 30 galleries. Now it's got like 100 galleries. I'm not involved with it anymore. I stepped away from it. But there it is in Basel. There it is in New York, where we ended up on the pier next to the Armory Show, which is a very prestigious fair. We were the partner fair. And then I ended up at NAGB, as my bio said, and now I run TERN Gallery, which is a commercial space where I now have completely joined the dark side, left the museum world, and I'm in the sort of commercial world. So all of that just to say, like, I've seen a lot of angles. This is a shot of the gallery. So I've known the art world from a lot of different perspectives. You get treated differently depending what kind of job you have. If you're a museum director or an art journalist, even though you're the same person. So that's an interesting thing. So I feel like I have a kind of lot of different access points. But again, that doesn't mean that, you know, my opinion is definitive. So I'm just really sort of sharing what I've observed. So the first thing is I get a lot is like, you know, questions about what it is being a professional artist. And I think it's from a very basic standpoint, it really is if you're making your full living from being an artist, which is the definition of any professional thing. If you're boxing on the weekend, you're not a professional boxer necessarily. That doesn't mean you're not accomplished. It doesn't mean you're not great, but it means you're not, you know, necessarily making your full-time job, which is how most of us operate in the Caribbean, because we all have to do other jobs to support our art job. There's also a lot of kind of, I think it's easy to be sort of cynical about the market and about the art world. Yeah. So the market controls everything. If it looks good, it must be bad. If it looks bad, it's a masterpiece. Art history is a lie and Hitler invented documenta. So again, I think the best thing to do is just trust your gut a lot of the time. And yes, it's important to kind of professionalize and to try to learn as much as you can, to be kind of well versed in what the art world is made up of. But again, you know, you always need to follow your gut and kind of form your own opinions. I think especially for being an artist, you know, there's lots of different, like I said, lots of different paths to being an artist. Not every artist wants to be on the cover of Art Forum. Maybe that's not, maybe you just want to actually make a living and get your kids in school and stay home and have a super, you know, there's lots of different paths for being a professional artist. One path isn't always the same for everybody. I think being an artist in the 21st century is no longer a romantic notion. I think sometimes people feel like the art world is a romantic place. People think working in a gallery is super glamorous. Today, I was like on the floor in my storage, like trying to lift a crate with, you know, again, we all know like the behind the scenes is not. So this idea of like kind of romanticizing being an artist. And I think that also goes for, obviously I love artists because I've worked with artists my whole career, but you know, they're not gods. And I think sometimes it's this idea of like, you're imbued with this talent and there's something special about that. Lots of people have lots of talents and it's really just a business. It's very specific because it is your soul. And I know that. And so that's a hard thing to kind of go out there and sell necessarily, or go out there and kind of, it's not a hat you can take off like if you go to a bank job necessarily. So it is different, but it's still, you need to treat it as, it's not a romantic thing. It's not that everyone owes you something for your talent, which I come across quite a lot. You know, you still have to work really hard at it, just like any job. And that means kind of like getting the credentials, knowing how it works, understanding all the really unsexy parts of it. I wouldn't go to school and study accounting and get out with my master's and expect to be the head of a bank. You know, I would expect to like get some crappy job making someone coffee for a while, and then I would slowly work my way up and, you know, again, like find the firm that fit me and all that. And it's really the same thing in the art world. So like, you know, no one gallery is necessarily better than another, but the one you want to find to fit you is about you and where you're going to fit. So again, research and exposure is really important. Working is important. Persistence is important. Invention and reinvention, visibility and readiness. So those are all different things. I actually have an Instagram from an artist that I follow, and it's kind of depressing, but it's not totally true, but it's interesting. And he posted it and I was like, yep. And he said, if you want to be this is an artist who is now becoming quite successful and is getting, whatever we consider success. He's picked up a couple of galleries. His work is selling very well. He's known internationally, but he's been working at it for, again, 15 years or however long it's been. If you want to be a full-time artist, go to your normal job, work twice as hard, doing every task with extra vigor, patience, and attention to detail. Be present and go hard as you can. And when you get home, then put 6 focused hours in the studio with even more enthusiasm because you've been waiting all day to get to the studio. Then after that, practice writing about your art at least an hour, draft statements, apply for fellowships, look at artist CVs and see what opportunities they got. Apply for stuff, even though you're not actually ready to win. You're training. When you get up the next day, start by reading the words of another artist or a history text, go to work, go as hard as you can, come home, go to the studio. Now, if you can't do this, enjoy your art as a hobby and be really happy about it. But if you can do this, you'll eventually work your way out of your day job. But you need to be training because the admin side of your practice will replace the day job and you will have to bust your buttons dealing with the service side of your art practice. In the end, there's no way around the diligent work. Eventually, you can hire someone to help you so you have more art making time. But if you want to be a full-time artist because you think it'll be less work, you'll be woefully misguided. So well, that was good advice. Basic questions. How do I prepare for the market? What art fairs do I do? How do I find a gallery? How do I find a curator? How do I price work? How do I maintain collector relations? So these are all things we're going to touch on. So preparation for the job, because it's a job. Create a full body of work. Having 1 or 2 works isn't enough for anyone to really form a judgment about your practice. That does, again, it takes a lot of input. It takes a lot of time. Then create another body of work. And like I just had an artist, we had her in a group show here. The work sold really well. Someone just wrote to me and they were like, oh, do you have more work by this artist? And so I wrote to her and I was like, oh, can we get more work? And she said, I've just been traveling and now I need to take some time because I don't want to just keep churning it out. And I need to rethink where I am and what I want to do in my practice. And, then I'm going to get back to work again. And so that's also part of the job is, taking stock, thinking where you are, looking at the work you've done. Is it the direction you want to be in? Don't just keep going. And also don't just keep making stuff that people want to buy. If you don't love making it, if you love making it, that's fine. But if you're just making things because people want it, that's going to be a dead end in the end. Have a proper digital portfolio. I will show you a little picture of what to do and what not to do. And that means have something at the ready. If someone sees something on your phone, you're like, oh, I'm an artist, let's look at my phone, or whatever, which happens, and that's okay. And they say, listen, here's my email. Have something ready to send. Know your history, know yourself. Collectors are interested in knowing, why are you making this work? What is, how come? Is it where you're from? Is it your experiences in life? Is it whatever it is? So be ready to talk about that. It can be uncomfortable. I know not all artists want to be super sharey and are quite introverted, but just again, work it out, even if it's just a few lines, even if it's just, think about what drove you to be an artist. I used to have a radio show. The first question I always asked was, what was your path? What was your path to being an artist? Everyone has a different path. So just think about that a little bit. Have your CV and your statement. Okay, your pictures are over my slideshow, so I'm going to make you small. Have your CV and artist statement ready. Again, should be part of your digital portfolio. Even if your CV is very short, even if you didn't go to art school, it's fine. Just, have something about a statement and about your life. And then, your artist statement, which is, what you're trying to do with your work. Why do you make it? Try to practice it, write it down a few times. Even if it's, again, just a little short paragraph, have someone help you. If you're not a great writer, that's fine. There's always someone around who's going to read something for you and give you some feedback. Try to get to know the market players and your competitors. So, that means going out, go to openings, go to museum shows, be informed of your market, whatever you're making in the world. If I had a brilliant idea for some new invention, I wouldn't just invest in it and put it out there without seeing if, again, the world needed it or what have you. So just, get to know your environment, learn a little bit about the art world, so that you can kind of come up with a trajectory for yourself or some kind of 5-year plan. Apply for residencies. I cannot underscore that enough. It's much harder for us in the region. I know that traveling is very hard, taking the time is very hard. But if you can do a residency or two, and it could even be an in-country residency, even if it's just taking a few weeks. And if there are any, I don't know what the situation is in the Cayman Islands, but there are a lot of international residencies that are now interested in artists of color, artists from the Caribbean, you know, so look for them and other residencies, because residencies are a great place to meet other artists. Specifically when we're from very small islands, I think we can be stuck in our kind of frame of reference, and it's really great to get out and see what other artists are doing and have other artists look at your work. I think other artists are like the best critics and the best soundboards. But obviously you have to trust them. And of course you'll meet curators. You'll meet curators at residencies. You'll maybe meet, you know, if you're interested in going back to school or whatever. So, because normally any residency will organize appointments with people to come in and look at the work. And it's just, feedback is really important for any practice. So residencies are great. And remember, this is a pitch, which is like you're basically selling yourself. You know, if you meet someone, you just need to know, again, what your work's about, who you are, and be able to articulate that. So where we go. Did I go the right way? There we go. Yes, we did. So presentation is everything. Make sure, like, decide on what your medium size and scale is, and then always communicate that, because we're working a lot now digitally. Very often people send things and I have no way of knowing if it's this big or this big, and that makes a difference. So make sure you've worked out what scale is best for you, first of all. Experiment with it. Sometimes, you know, again, everybody just buys pre-made canvases or pre-made paper the same size. You know, it might be suddenly experimenting with a different size changes everything for you, whether it's going bigger or going smaller. Think about your materials. Please think about the quality of your materials. If you're a painter, learn how to stretch canvas, and do not buy pre-made shop canvases. They're the worst because they don't have longevity. And even if you're making great work, you know, a lot of people won't want to buy something they know isn't going to last that long. Because they're just badly made, basically. So try to learn how to stretch if you're a painter and you want to work on canvas. And of course, like I said, get your portfolio together. Think about yourself like as a brand, not in a kind of gross advertising way, but just, again, you know, your story, your work, what that means, like, and just be confident with it. And that doesn't mean you have to become something you're not, but just be comfortable in your, you know, in yourself and your own practice. And understand what your work, you know, represents. This is the yes and no of sending pictures to anybody. I don't think I've ever asked John if I can do this. This is on the left. The no, the big no is just a snapshot I took in his studio when I was visiting. This is not something he sent me. It is the same artist. And then on the right, or me looking at the right, is from his portfolio and is an installation we did. I think that was the installation at the Martinique Biennial. And so again, if you're putting a portfolio together, take good pictures. Can be with your iPhone, that's fine, or your Samsung or whatever, but just make sure they're clean, make sure they're decent resolution, put them on a white background. If you're shooting at home, you're shooting paintings like on the floor, pick it up off the floor, get it eye level. If you have to like stick it on top of a cupboard, that's fine, but then drape the cupboard with a white sheet. Like, you know, you don't want a lot of, when you're looking at work, you don't want to be competing with the kitty litter and like a couple of bottles of wine. And you know, I've seen things like that. And it's very difficult to like gauge the work. And again, from this shot, I can't tell the scale of it, the one on the floor. The one on the right, I can, because it's in a room and I can get a sense of it. Even better, which he didn't do, would be to have the dimensions in the caption. Have the media, even if it looks obvious. Maybe that's mixed media on canvas. I can't tell. Maybe it might be just paint, but it might also have some collage on it that I can't really see because it's not a great picture. So make sure you explain what it is. Make sure you take a good picture of what it is. And again, you don't have to have a fancy studio and fancy lighting. Just make sure it's, you know, a head-on picture, so it's not like a weird angle. Make sure there's nothing like around that is, again, distracting. And just try to make it as clean as possible, and add, you know, title, year, really important. Maybe you have great work from 4 years ago, but maybe you're doing something else now. And if you get a portfolio and the year's not there and you get a lot of different looking work, you're kind of like, what's this artist doing? But if some of it is like a body of work from 5 years ago and some of it is a body of work from 2 years ago, then you understand it's a progression, right? So that's important too. So dealing with galleries. Now I'm a gallerist, so I'm going to be really mean about galleries. We just feel more comfortable when we work with dead artists. That's an inside joke. Obviously we don't, we love artists, but I think, you know, the gallery artist relationship can be quite fraught, but also great. So it's sort of like a marriage, you know, you're like in it together, it's a partnership. So again, when you're approaching a gallery, or if you're looking for a gallery, I mean, try not to approach your gallery yourself as more kind of like a New York art market thing. I think in our context, you can approach a gallery yourself because we're in very small communities and we kind of know each other more. But it is generally always better to be recommended by somebody else, because of course you're going to sell yourself. Of course you are. We all are. But if someone else recommends you and says, my gosh, I saw this artist the other day, I was in a studio and it's really great, you should take a look. That's just better. It's, you know, because it's coming from someone else. So if you can wangle that, do it. Research, not just in your own community, but again, there might be a gallery for you outside of the Cayman Islands that is working with artists that really fit with what you're doing. There's so many good online tools now between ArtNet and Artsy and Art News, and, you know, most of them you can just scroll through without subscribing. You might get extra information if you're pro, but again, like there's a lot you can get online. Before you, I used to get, hasn't happened to me here yet, but it probably will. But when I used to work at another gallery, you know, I would get people send portfolios that just had nothing to do with what we were doing. And it's kind of like, why are you sending me this? And you're just taking up my time. And it's you know, so again, research the gallery. If you're going to approach a gallery, do you fit with their program? If they're only a photography gallery and you're a painter, don't, you know, because people do, they're just like, I'm just going to send a CV to like every gallery on my list. Don't do it. It's a waste of time, and it's a waste of your energy. It's a waste of the gallery's energy. Generally, if we just get like random portfolios, like without anyone saying anything, you know, we might take a look at it, but again, like everyone's super busy, whether they're at a museum or at a gallery. And so again, it's better to like maybe call and ask, do you actually look at portfolios? Do you have a day of the week where you might do that, or one day a month? Because some galleries do that. They're like, I dedicate one day a month to like looking at portfolios because the rest of the time I'm just crazy. So do some research, find out. And again, find out what you're attracted to and make up your mind. Like, don't necessarily wait for a gallery to come and find you, but you know, find people that you think you're going to align with. Other artists are a great way to go. If you can make connections to other artists outside of your region or outside your country or within your country, and they always have insight, they have recommendations. That's a really good way to go. So don't be impressed by size. The biggest galleries aren't always the best galleries. Sometimes, especially when you're starting out, you want to be with a bit of a young, scrappy gallery because they're going to like put effort into you. It can be great if a big gallery is like, oh, I want to show you, but sometimes you just end up in a group show and you get lost amongst all the galleries. That's not to say if a big gallery wants to work with you, it's going to be terrible, but just that's not the only metric. Like I said, it is like a marriage. You should get to know the people in the space as well. Because again, you have to have a lot of difficult conversations about production costs, about money, about who's going to which fair, about who's getting a show when. And like a marriage, it's got to be like a very honest, very frank conversation that's open and intimate, and you've got to come away from it still respecting each other. So you got to know that like you can share hard truths with each other or whatever it is, and still get along and work. So again, it's a important, close relationship, but it's something that, you know, if you're gonna be married to that person for 5 or 10 years, you better make sure you can communicate with them. Not that you get along like you necessarily have to go out drinking buddies, but that, you know, you can, that you fit somehow. Be visible but not pushy. What does that mean? I literally had an artist in here at an opening the other night of some gallery. So it was a group show. So it was 4 artists, and this other artist came in and was talking about their own work. And I'm like, we're at someone else's opening. Like, I'm focused on these artists tonight. Like, I'm very happy to talk to you about your work another time, but please not on someone, you know, it's about them tonight. So definitely show up places when people see your face. there is a kind of visual like, oh yeah, oh, he's been in my gallery I know him. He comes to all the shows. Yeah, I'm going to make time for that dude because he makes time for me, right? So it's kind of a, so, you know, definitely like make an appointment, but, you know, if someone's like, I can't this week, then they can't this week. And then just obviously try to find a time that works for everybody. Because we do want to look at as much as we can and get to know as many people as we can, but everyone's time is difficult. So just try to be, again, respectful of people's time. I don't mind when people walk in and say, I'm an artist, would you mind working my work? I'll always say, sure, I will, but not right now. You know, like if people just walk in and, you know, I'm again, like normally my days are like conference calls, meetings, you know, planning the next show. So normally on the spot, it's not the best time, but I'll be like, sure, you know, make an appointment, like, and I'll look at my calendar and I'll be like, okay, next Wednesday looks kind of free. So let's say we have half an hour on Wednesday morning. And then, then you have the time and the kind of headspace to do it. Pricing your work, that's really complicated. So again, look at other artists' work. What matters is your technique, your material, your size, and the production. So again, oil is generally a little bit more than acrylic, but not always anymore. Bronze is obviously more than wood, but again, it also depends where you are in your career. But think about, you know, the technique, the material, the size, obviously the production. Those things do matter. What doesn't actually matter is sort of some idea of quality. Like everyone has a different, I mean, obviously if it's garbage, it's garbage. So we can just say that if someone's like literally done, but it's not, you know, rating it is going to be subjective. And that's also why finding the right gallery for you is because, you know, different dealers have different eyes, different collectors have different eyes. I know artists that have a great technique and like do things beautifully, but it's just not for our space. It wouldn't work with our program. So that's but again, so I would think about, look at other people making work at your level. How many hours you worked on it normally doesn't really come into it either. So some artists are like, I only make 2 works a year, so therefore they're this much. Yeah, maybe you could price it a little more, but again, if you're still only making a drawing this big, it's really hard to convince somebody that that's worth $50,000. If you're, again, we're talking about being an emerging artist. Maybe if you're Picasso, something that big can be $50,000. But I think if you're really kind of breaking into the market, it's hard to say, oh, I worked on this for 6 months, so I'm charging $50,000. No one's going to buy a work from an emerging artist for $50,000. So you just have to be kind of, and then your own personal preference. I have that with artists too. They're like, well, I really like this one, so let's price it more. It doesn't work like that. You know, it is kind of like scale, size, technique, you know. You can work out your own factoring way of doing it, which sounds, again, very kind of crass. But it's just easy, like if you're making work in different scales. And then again, look at global pricing. So we have a problem in the Bahamas because things are expensive, like generally art materials are expensive. So young artists here seem to like price their work, you know, quite high. And I'm always like, yeah, okay, yes, but you might need to bring that down a little if we take that to Miami, because, you know, if you're making, again, a watercolor, it's going to be really hard to sell that for 10 grand when someone else is same level in their career is selling it for 5 or whatever. So do a little market research and like look at what generally people are kind of, you know, at your level, at wherever you are in your career, whether you're mid-career, late career, emerging, your scale, just try to get a sense of like, you know, what pricing is. So you're not just making up prices out of your, out of thin air. So you can work on it. This is not, I'm not saying these are the prices you should do. I'm just saying you could work out a formula like that, where you kind of look at other people's work and you're like, okay, it's about this scale. This is it. So that if I make it this much bigger, I'm going to times it by that much. Obviously editions have a different pricing structure because there's more of them. So again, you have to be kind of smart about that. Because if you're making let's say you're a photographer and you're making an edition of 25, it can't be the same price as if you're making an edition of 5. Because there's only 5. So you can't just be like, well, I've made this picture and everybody loves it, so I'm just going to endlessly keep printing it and I'm going to keep selling it for $5,000 until I've made it. That's not going to work. So you just have to be kind of savvy about, and then just go ask someone, like, you know, ask some questions, ask someone who's got a gallery by you or is working, and try to figure out like what your factor is. And because I actually have had, like, I've been to, you know, emerging shows, and I'll say, or I'll go to a studio visit and I'll be like, oh, so what are these, you know, what are you pricing them down? And they'll be like, well, I don't know. What do you think? And I mean, now that I'm a dealer, that's an okay question. But if I go in as a collector, which I also am, or I go in, you know, so I think it's good for you to have an idea. Yes, if you're really beginning, you can ask people's advice. But if someone's coming, and specifically if a collector is coming to your studio, like make sure you have a price. And then don't be so quick to give a discount. Like I've had artists also be like, because they want to be in the collection, they'll say, well, it's $6,000, but for you, I'd give it. And I'm like, don't undervalue yourself, know your value. Yes, discounts are quite common in our industry, but normally you only get a discount if you're a trusted collector, like you've bought several times from a space. You've bought several times from an artist, then you can start giving a 10% discount or a 15% discount. But you know, not if you've just met someone for the first time, and if they ask you for a discount, that's just being rude. Because again, you know your worth and stand by it. Yes, if the show's up for 2 weeks and you haven't sold anything, you can call somebody back and be like, listen, I know you really love this. You know, I'm willing to go down on the price a little bit. Fine. There's all room for negotiation, but just don't like out of the gate undervalue yourself. Know your value, stay true to your value. Once you've done the research, again, don't come up with crazy numbers and then be like, well, I say that's what it is because I think I'm that great. Base it on something so that you have a sound basis for how you're pricing your work. Art fairs. We love them and hate them. I started one, I ran one for 15 years. So I love them and hate them in equal measure. Galleries do a lot of them now. So this is funny. No more. You've had way too many art fairs already. Some galleries do like 20 art fairs a year. We're only doing 3 and it's already killing us. But they are quite important. And not just as a gallery to exhibit, but as an artist, sometimes they're a great place to go and just, again, look at what's out there. It's been crazy. And in 1992, there was basically 5 major art fairs. I mean, there were a few more, but there was basically 5. There was like Basel, Cologne, Madrid, Chicago, and somewhere else. And in 2017, there were over 200. Partially that's because of how the global art world has just expanded exponentially. But also just, yeah, there's just more art and more to do. So there's kind of like a little list on the right there, which I quickly tried to readjust because since the pandemic, all the dates have changed and the whole fair calendar is kind of messed up. But I don't know why I said July, August, Bahamas there. I think that's just me on vacation. There isn't an art fair in Bahamas in July. That's just me being on vacation. But there's kind of a calendar. The art world kind of moves around the world with this calendar. Some are more, they all have, the fairs all have kind of different flares in a way, but they're great places to, if you're not with a gallery, you're not exhibiting at the fair, they're still actually a good place to just go and look. You learn a lot. You learn a lot about the global market. You learn a lot about what's being made in other countries. Again, there's nothing romantic about them. They're trade shows. That's what they are. When people used to ask me, what do I do? And I was running Volt, I'd be like, it's a trade show. I rent space to galleries. I'm a real estate broker. Because, again, that's what the gallery's there to do. They're there to sell work. They're there to make their money back. Trade shows are really expensive. Art fairs are really expensive. The ones we do probably cost us about, I'd say easily $50,000 to participate in an art fair. Once you've added up the shipping, paying for the booth, the hotel, the flights, the extra hands on deck you need to help out, the price of wood, building a crate these days, oh my Lord, they're really expensive. And so that means we have to sell $100,000 worth of art just to break even, because of course we're sharing 50-50 with our artists. So that's a really bad place to try to introduce yourself to a gallery. So go to an art fair by all means, to do research. It's a great place to look at what's out there, to be exposed to work, to learn something. Maybe you'll meet other artists, because a lot of artists go to art fairs and hang out. There's always a lot of good after parties. There's a lot of good talks. There's always interesting panels. There's interesting people. It's good to go. But do not walk into a booth and say, oh, hi, I'm an artist, I want to show you my work. Because the gallery is so stressed out that they're just trying to make money and they're trying to sell and they're trying to make connections, and no. So unless you're at a party later and you're like, oh, I was in your booth today, it was great. That's different. But or if it's super dead and there's not a single client in the entire tent or building, then that's okay too. but not if it looks busy, and certainly not if the dealer's talking to someone. And even if they're like busy, like on their laptop, they're probably sending out an offer to try to sell something. So just, that's not a good place to approach a gallery. But take notes, take notes. I saw this gallery. Every gallery loves, oh, I was at the fair, and out of all the 300, yours really stood out. I loved so-and-so artist, because, you know, we love our work as much as you love your work. So we want to feel seen as well. So again, if you want to get to know a gallery, flattery will get you everywhere. Honest flattery. You'll meet a lot of different people at art fairs. This again was out of a magazine article that I thought was hysterical. It's in the list of who's the most important person at an art fair and who's the least important person at an art fair. And it's funny, but also somewhat true. So the collector is, of course, the top of the heap. The celebrity, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I guess when, you know, Puff Daddy comes to your fair, suddenly everybody wants to go. The idle hanger-on socialite, not really sure about that. But the curators, obviously, curators go to fairs a lot because museums are broke, and it's a really good place for a curator to like get an overview of what's happening, to look at a lot of art and to discover artists to put in shows. The represented artist is, of course, kind of an important person because they're there and they're on show. It's a very awkward place to be for an artist when you're being shown, actually. So some artists love it, some artists hate it. I mean, it is a bit like a meat market. So, you know, it's not always a fun place to be, but it can be. Art advisor, the art advisors are the people who, you know, tell the collectors what to buy, basically. The print critic, the museum director, yeah, quite low on the list, but not the lowest, because there's a whole other list. So the art handler, who we all rely on, the PR rep, the photographer, and then the unrepresented artist. So that's what I mean by like, and I think it's kind of, again, it's an ironic article, but it really is like you're walking around trying to kind of like meet people, and it's hard. So just pick your right time. If you're unrepresented, wait till the after party, wait till the like cocktail hour, wait till you're not, you know, at the fair, because that's a rough time to introduce yourself to people, at least to the dealers. I mean, to other people milling around. The restaurants at art fairs, great places to meet people, because everyone's sitting there and eating, and like, you know, you'll meet other people. So they're quite good places for socializing. Collectors, another breed. Remember how we used to ignore you before you became a successful artist? Yes. Collectors are important to our field, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So there's some people that are collectors because they really want to build like a kind of collection that's going to last. They want to donate to a museum. There's collectors that just want to like hang something over their sofa, and they're all really important because they all love art, or they wouldn't be spending money on it. So treat them well, unless of course they're being rude to you, which no one deserves that. But again, like generally collectors are really interested in art. They really want to know about you. They want to know about your practice. But keep them informed, because again, you know, they want to know what you're doing. If somebody drops a lot of money in your studio or your gallery, it's nice to send them, you know, a line occasionally about when your next show's coming up, or if you have new work coming out of the studio. So, you know, most artists I know now that are working very professionally, they'll keep a list, you know, they'll get people's email and they'll write like a newsletter, maybe every month or maybe every 6 months or whatever it is. And even if it's a newsletter, that's okay. It doesn't have to be personal. You can, if somebody's a very good collector of yours, send them like a postcard from where you are or your residency or whatever, because they want to follow your work and they want to be informed. And they're also competing with a lot of, you know, there's a lot of competition. So it also is just a way to like keep you in their mind. Definitely maintain at least a website or an Instagram, either one, but at least one, if not both. It's important. It's really important. It's really important for curators. It's really important. You know, again, if you meet someone at a fair, you meet someone you're traveling, or you meet someone down the road from your house and you're like, I'm an artist. And what I do is I go back and I Google them, or if they have a web, you know, I'll try to find their work online. And that's the, you know, and if you can keep up, again, like your bodies of work from previous years, people can see your growth. You can have your bio on there. You can basically have all the basic information there. And that's really important. It's especially important for curators because they want to see more than like one image. Maintain a broad collector base if you can, and don't just rely on one supporter, because some artists like will have one person who just always buys, but you know, you need to kind of like broaden your support base so that if that one person moves or whatever, you have it. So try to broaden a collector base. Sometimes collectors, their kids will start collecting, you know, so it's kind of like relationship building. And when you're doing a studio visit, please offer someone a glass of water. And because sometimes people, if they'll be doing lots in a day, just make sure, when they come in, there's somewhere to sit and you have a glass of water. So you're sort of hosting them. Curators. He says he's curating a biennale. He wants to know if anyone here does video. Sorry, I love these cartoons. They make me laugh. Why won't my thing work? Sorry, my little arrows aren't working. Curators are, very often they're independent agents in the field. Some of them work for institutions, some of them don't. Some can be independent curators, but they're important because they're basically connectors, right? Curators will often like put your name in a room if someone's putting a show together, or they'll be doing a show that will maybe be traveling. They do have their own agenda, which is fine. So just sort of get to know who is interested in what. Like not all curators come in the same package. Some are particularly interested in one kind, like they're only interested in landscape work, or they're only interested in post-colonial work, or they're only interested. So to try to get to know by looking at their work. Again, like with the gallery, like what their field of interest is. And if you feel like you fit in that field of interest, then obviously pursue that relationship. They are more critical than kind of commercial, like galleries, although they do get paid by galleries quite often to like do a show. So it's important to like try to develop relationships with curators, have them on your roster. So again, like with the collector, send them out. I've got some new work. Here's my new work. You can't just wait for things to happen. So artists are not helpless, because I think sometimes it's just like, well, I'm making all this work and no one knows about it. It's really hard to know, even in a small community, what every artist is doing all the time. So it's very helpful when you get updates, or if somebody reaches out to you and says, I've got some new work, or I've been in the studio. Do you have time in the next month to come for a visit? So just try to, again, develop those relationships. Definitely also listen to what the curator has to say. Curators look at a lot of work. Sometimes they'll have good critical feedback. Critique is really important, and critique doesn't mean it's always going to be bad news, but we represent an artist who's doing very, very well right now, and we're going to the Armory with him. But I was meeting with one curator, and she was like, I just don't know. I love the way that he sticks the paper on the canvas. Maybe you can talk to him about like different materials. And so, and it's not to say the work is bad. It's just like, she's like, I'm thinking about longevity. I'm thinking about how that's going to survive if, a museum buys it. So sometimes they have good feedback about things. So just listen to what they have to say. You don't always have to take it on board, but, listen. And then, invite them for studio visits, try to do studio visits. Studio visits are awkward sometimes, but, it's like having someone over to your house that you don't really know that well. But again, just practice talking about your work and why you love it. You must love your work if you're an artist. So tap into that love for it and that excitement for it, and just talk about the work. And but like I said, always give someone a glass of water, because it's just nice when you, like, if somebody came to my house, I wouldn't like have them sit there for an hour and not be like, can I get you something? So it doesn't have to be fancy. But sometimes people will do several studio visits in a day, and maybe a pretzel or a glass of water would be nice. And if people are older, somewhere to sit too, even if it's like, again, doesn't have to be fancy. Like I had one artist who was like, do I have to clean up before they come over? And I was like, no, like it's an artist studio. No one expects it to be clean. But just make sure there's like, if the person's older, or they're tired, that they have somewhere to sit. Because sometimes I've done studio visits, literally it's been like my last one of the day, and I've done 12, and I'm just like literally like leaning against the wall, just like, institutions like the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands. Do's and don'ts. Support your institution. What does that mean? Doesn't mean you have to become a member if you can't afford it, but show up. Again, showing up's important. You know, if you can volunteer or be a member, do that too, because again, they're all part of the ecosystem, and institutions are scrambling. I used to be a museum director, like I said, wear a lot of different hats. And when you feel like, I think anyone, just like artists, like everyone doing any job wants to feel like their job is valued. And I think sometimes in the art world, it's like, again, the artist is always like the most important person, which yes, you are, because without the artist, none of us would exist. But, you know, I've had people say things to me, like I had one artist tell me, we were doing a show at the National Gallery of Bahamas, and he hadn't let us do a studio visit with him yet. And we had it on, you know, we had it on the program. I was like, when are we going to do the studio visit? Like, when did you come see the work? And he said, I don't know why you're all getting so uptight. All you have to do is paint the walls. And I thought, oh, okay, thanks. Obviously, there's a lot more to that. So, you know, just try to be respectful, but also just be supportive, which means showing up occasionally, etc. Consider their timeline too. So, and consider your timeline. So some institutions, they might have different kinds of shows. They might have an emerging art show. They might only show work of like master artists. So think about like the timeline of your involvement with the institution, what they might be considering. So they might not accept you for a show right away, but it might be because that's not like they want you to do a few more shows, like at other galleries first to be more established. It really depends what kind of institution it is. So again, sort of try to get to know the different institutions. I know in Cayman Islands, you don't have an array to choose from, but again, like if you're thinking about, you know, working, let's say in Miami or something like that, or consider their mission. So different museums have different missions, but again, like generally museums are educational. So they're not sales oriented. Sometimes, especially in our smaller communities, like the artists want the museum to like help them sell work. And that's not the mission of the institution, which is why I opened a gallery. Because again, when I was at the NAGB, people were like, I need a show, I want to sell my work. And I was like, that's not how this works. Like, we're educational. We're here to, you know, encourage people to love art and to, yeah, lots of different things, but we're not here to necessarily sell work. One show is not a game changer. So what does that mean? It just means, you know, don't just assume because you've been in the show once that suddenly everything's changed and the relationships change. Like, it's the whole art world is about relationship. And so work on the relationships. That's really very important. And of course, they are about historicization and scholarship. So there's a whole part of working at a museum that probably a lot of people don't think about. Like, we used to get a lot of people saying, oh, my daughter wants to come intern at the NAGB because she's an artist. And I'm like, we don't make art all day. We do research all day and we write things all day. So think about, again, what it is they're doing, how they can, you know, support you if you're in the show, but also then how you might be able to support them. And again, like, create relationships, because that's how careers, and think about like where you want to be and what milestones you want to achieve, and try to kind of work through those. I think this is the last slide. Is it the last slide? Yeah, it is. Look. So first show, radical promising breakthrough. Second show, consecrated biennial bound. Third show, like the old work better. Fourth show, made by the assistants. Fifth show, as long as it sells. That's, again, all the comics were just there to make you laugh. And that is the end of my presentation.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Very good, very informative.
That was very good.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. That was really, really interesting and entertaining as well, but also, sorry, dogs in the house.
That's okay, I'm a dog lover.
Does anyone have any questions? I know a lot was covered, so.
A lot was covered, I know, and I talk really fast. I'm like, boom, boom, boom. But again,
General questions. Have you found in your career that during bouts of higher inflation, work sells more because it's an investment to hedge? Or have you seen anything?
sometimes, yes, actually, and definitely, yeah, no, I mean, I have seen that, definitely. I think, I mean, I personally try to avoid people that are buying art for investment purposes, but I'm one of those old, I'm even though I keep saying it's not romantic, I'm a romantic. I want people to love the work they live with. But yeah, I do see that happening. And again, people are kind of savvy about art now too. So they are looking for ways. So then maybe they'll buy 3 from emerging artists and be ready to sell 2 later on in their career. And so we personally at our gallery, we have a 5-year moratorium on putting anything at auction. So we make the client sign a contract saying they won't put it at auction for at least 5 years, because I think that can be very difficult. That can create like a really difficult situation with the artist prices, and can create inflation that then is not sustainable. But yeah, I do see that happening.
Okay, and from your perspective,
right now it's like the jazz age. Like right now, everyone's been on lockdown for 2 years and they're just ready to get out there and like spend money and go to parties, and it's crazy. It's literally like the 80s again, which is good for me.
So it's good. Now, of course, you try to mitigate the inflationary portion of that, because it could lead to kind of a market crash, but you don't.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what I mean about knowing your prices. Like you might be able to sell it for more, but is that sustainable? So you need to think about that. You need to sell that long term. You need to think about, again, like increasing prices. Like I've seen some people be like, I had one good art fair, I'm putting all my prices up $5,000. And you might make enough money to pay for your kids' school that year, but it might not be sustainable. So you need to and galleries too, they have to raise prices incrementally, and it has to be based on a reason. So like we raise artist prices if they just got purchased by a couple of really big institutions, then we'll raise prices. We'll raise prices if, it's been 3 years. I mean, I've had the gallery a year, but because I've been in the business so long, like if a gallery's been, if the artist has been around for 3 years and then they've done a couple of like great biennials or something like that. So that has to be like tied to fact. It can't just be like, well, I need more money now, so I'm just going to charge more. I think it's okay if there is some kind of inflation to put up prices a little bit. Like right now we're talking, but not a lot. I mean, we're talking about like putting up our prices like $500, because again, crating has gotten so expensive. So every time we crate something, so we're just like, we have to wrap that into the price, because again, the gallery, we actually don't even split 50-50 because we're crazy. We're probably going to eventually, but our percentage is lower because we're trying to again, support the artists right now. But the gallery pays all those costs, right? So you pay for the crating, you pay for the shipping, you pay for the, and the client's always like, the client's supposed to pay for the delivery, but they never do. They're always like, well, if we pay will you just deliver that to my house in Aspen or whatever? And you're like, and global shipping prices right now are crazy. So some of those things, and I'm not sure they're going to drop. So, but again, we're thinking about very incremental price. We're not putting up everything $10,000. We're putting it all up, 500, 1,000 to kind of cover those like margins.
Final question. Do you, in an artist's career, gallery shows precede museum?
Generally, yes. I mean, generally, yes. In the rest of the world, definitely in the Caribbean, sometimes, you'll end up in a museum show because again, we have a smaller ecosystem. So, in say New York or London or wherever, or Ohio, where they also have good galleries and museums, yes, you'll start out, you'll do a few student shows after school that you'll organize yourself. And then you'll do a couple of group shows in a gallery and some galleries. And then maybe a gallery will take you on. And then, and then like the curators start looking, and then you're like, end up in a museum show. And obviously the end of your career, you'll have the big solo show at the museum. So that's kind of the normal kind of trajectory.
Okay.
But I think again, in our communities, because, our museums in the Bahamas and in the Cayman Islands are trying to also sort of nurture the ecosystem. I think, you can expect to end up in like an open call show or maybe a group show, after a few years of like showing, that, but, you have to try to go out there and like, whether it is putting on your own shows or finding a space, because you also need to learn some lessons about putting on a show and being in a show and things like that. And museums like to work with people that know what that's like, because it's just a good learning curve that everyone kind of comes to the table knowing about how it is to put on a show.
I'm originally from New York, so I'm kind of familiar.
There you go. Good. Yeah. But again, I think in the Cayman Islands, it's slightly different, because like here too, like we did shows with young artists who hadn't shown that much at all, and we would do them at the NAGB because there just weren't that many other, like there's now 3 galleries functioning, like ourselves and 2 other galleries, but really 8 years ago there really weren't. There was a few tourist galleries on Bay Street, but there weren't like proper galleries. So you couldn't really say, well, come to me in 20 years after you've done like, so I think, you know, in our context, there's a bit more of a kind of porousness. So, yeah.
I would say too, you know, keep your eyes open for open calls, like she said, but not just physical exhibitions. With COVID and the lockdown and everything, a lot of museums have looked at digital exhibitions.
Yep.
The National Gallery in Cayman is one of them. So sometimes those can be a bit more inclusive. And it's, if you're kind of dipping your toes into exhibiting in a museum, it might be a good way to see how the process works without having to worry about the logistics of shipping and things like that. And there's different requirements, you know, for digital exhibitions, but
exactly. And Mac actually did a digital art show too. Like a lot of places, like there were sort of, you know, things in the region doing art shows to kind of connect artists to other artists. So I would say like keep a lookout for those things. And also don't, you know, it's hard. Listen, it's hard being an artist. I know that. Because it's hard, because you know you're putting yourself into things, and sometimes, you know, you submit and you don't get accepted and you feel like you go to this whole like, oh god, my art's not good enough. But you know, sometimes it's like it just didn't fit the theme, or it was too big, or so you know, don't be discouraged, and all, but also just, it is practice. It's like saying to an athlete, oh, you're going to go to the Olympics like right after you, like, no, you've got to keep practicing. So it's also, just look at it like practice. You know, applying for residencies or applying to, it's practice till you get good at it. And so don't be like discouraged if it doesn't happen right off the bat. I've been in lots of rooms, either whether it's for like group shows or whether it's for the fair, and that was galleries applying, and the gallery didn't get in, but we had a long conversation about that gallery, or same with the artist. You know, we'd be like, oh, the work, you know, really, it actually happened with the Mac online show. You know, there was some really great work and it just didn't, like, for whatever reason, didn't fit the theme, or didn't whatever. But, you know, you've talked about the artist, and maybe they end up on a list for some other show you might do or whatever. So, and you don't necessarily always know that, because again, if you get 300 applications, the curator can't write to every artist and be like, oh, by the way, we love the work and we thought that later we'll get in touch with you. So you just get the rejection being like, no. But just know that sometimes, you know, again, the applying, I used to tell galleries, oh, I didn't get into Volta. And I'd be like, so I'm not applying this year because I didn't get in last year. And I was like, okay, so now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're not going to get in because you're not even going to apply. So, you know, so there is something about, you know, again, and I know it can feel soul destroying, but sometimes conversations are being had in the room about your work that you don't know about. So it's important because it's just getting in front of eyes, right? And you don't know who in that room is going to remember that or call you later or whatever it is. So it's always valuable, even if you don't feel like it's valuable at the time. And I think that's a good thing to remember.
I will second that. And it's submitting multiple times too gets the gallery familiar with you, and they'll recognize your name and your work. And it's always good to see what artists are up to. So
yeah, and sometimes you want to see progression, or you want to see, like, maybe you've got one work, maybe it's a flash in the pan, maybe they're a crappy artist the rest of the time, but this one work is great. So, you know, like, there is something, and that happens even again with galleries. Like I tell, you know, my partner here now, I'm like, listen, sometimes you don't sell anything at a fair for the first 3 years, you know, because the first year collectors just want to, like, they're like, oh, this gallery, like, oh, the Bahamas, interesting. But, you know, they're not really sure who the hell you are. And like I said, it's all relationship. They don't know if they can trust you. They don't know if your artists are really that good. They think they like the look of it, but they're not sure. They see you the next year. They're like, oh, these people are serious. They're back again. Huh. Wow. Yeah, I'm going to write this name down now, and I'm going to go to their website, you know, and then maybe in the third year, you actually start making money. So, because, you know, it takes time to again, like, know anything, develop anything. So sometimes, like, you know, the first few times it is just like, you know, you want to see longevity, and you want to see commitment, and you want to see, you know, development and all those things. And you don't get that from one go. You get that from, like, repeated effort. So.
Okay.
Lynn, do you have a question? Let me come off mute. The dogs are not in the room anymore. You know what? You guys have covered a lot of it. And believe me, I've been thinking about this topic nonstop for the last while because you know, I have had an opportunity to have my work shown. It's still an opportunity. I don't know if it's going to come come to pass. And but I guess my question is around emerging artists who are maybe not classically trained, have some schooling, I've been painting for a long time like myself, but not, and I understand all of what you've said, having a great story, understanding your artist story, being true to it, getting your brand organized, all those things.
I don't actually think it matters where you went to school. I mean, again, it's like anything. I mean, let's use myself because I'm here. I went to some dipshit university in Paris. I went to the American University in Paris. It's not a brand name university. I had a great education there because it was in Paris. So we would get on a bus and we would go look at art in Italy. And I mean, I saw so much art, I can't tell you. When I ended up at grad school in New York, where I thought I would never get in because I was from some dipshit university, I knew more than half those kids that have been at Stanford and Harvard because I'd actually seen work, right? So I don't think it's always about like where you've gone to school. I mean, certainly those things do help. We know they do. Like you have a network, I go to Harvard, I'm going to get an internship at this law firm, and then I'm going to, so yes, we all know that comes into play. And, but I think, I also know a lot of artists that go to grad school and they can talk a lot, but their work's still not that great. So, so you just don't know. So I wouldn't feel badly about the fact that if you didn't go to RISD or whatever, it's just all part of the story. So and sometimes, yeah, sure, you see, you're like, oh, they went to RISD, okay, yeah, or they went to SCAD, or they went to wherever. But it doesn't mean anything. There's
once the story is interesting, that grabs them.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you just have an understanding of materials and you didn't need to go to grad school. So, again, I think grad school is more about connections and relationships than it is about really the practical side of it. It's really about, again, learning how to do a studio visit, meeting curators, and things like that. That really helps at grad school. And that's why you get all these young superstars, because all the New York galleries are up there trawling around New Haven looking for the new thing. So yes, that can help for grad school, but I don't think it makes your work any better necessarily.
Yeah.
No, not really.
So, I think it's really all about, again, it's so hard to say, how do you quantify good art? I mean, it's, again, there's taste, there's this, there's that, but I think it sort of comes down to my husband always says inventio over imitatio. You know what I mean? Just when you see something that, you just know when you see it. It's and it might just be I'm looking right now at a portrait photographer. Yes, there's been 1,000 portrait photographers in the world, but there's, she's doing something different to me. And so that's what I see. And so that's always about finding your unique voice, right? And that, however that happens. And it sounds very corny, but that's kind of what it is, and not looking at what other people are doing and, oh, this is hip right now, or I've got to be like that. And no, you really have to, again, just dig into yourself. That's really about.
Great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I walked into an art store one time and I looked up and saw a picture and I immediately identified who the artist was. That artist has passed away. And the guy said, how do you know that? I was like, my father knew him personally, and I grew up watching his work. So I know it when I see it. And he goes, wow. I'm like, yeah. I said, yeah. I didn't know what I was looking at when I was younger. And I didn't know he was famous. My father had to tell me he was famous because I saw him in a book.
And that's part of your story.
And that makes the story interesting. My father used to draw with him. And I says, hey, Pop, this guy has the same name as your friend in this book. He says, no, that's him. And I realized my father knew famous people. I'm like, holy crap, how you know this guy? And we draw together. That's how I know this guy. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But those interesting stories. People love stories. So if you can make them a great story.
Again, all of life is a story, right? Yeah. I mean, and also look what got us through the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
These books, art. I mean, that is absolutely, and I think. I think people are kind of realizing that too. Banking didn't get us through the pandemic, art did.
Yeah. What's your take on art not being in schools? Schools cut their budgets. How do you see that as a professional, and how does it affect the field as you move forward?
I think it's just absolutely shocking. I really do. I mean, I say it's not romantic, and again, it's not romantic in the sense of if you want to be an artist, you have to know it's a business basically. And I think a lot of artists don't want to accept that. But I think I am a romantic in the way that I think art is extremely empowering and powerful. And like we have, I don't know how things are in Cayman Islands, but in the Bahamas, we have like a super high crime rate for the size of our population. And you know, again, I think it is tied to the fact that they don't teach art in school, literally, because I think, I mean, not only, but I think, you know, it creates a whole human being. And I think if you neglect a part of the human being, you know, you can't be surprised if the human being stops being human. And, you know, and I think art's a lot about empathy and understanding and seeing things from different points of view and all of these things that like make us better human beings. And just, you know, again, like other thinking skills, critical thinking skills. Art is great for critical thinking skills. I don't know why people always want to cut it. Because, you know, they've proven that if you like do pottery, it helps you with your concentration. Like you've got kids in school that like can't sit still, put them in a freaking pottery class and they'll be able to do math that afternoon. But they don't see that. And I think it's awful. I think it's awful. And I think, yeah.
And how has it affected the art field from your perspective over time, with less of the schools giving the basics to get maybe potential artists moving in that professional direction? Do you see attrition over time, or not necessarily?
I'm sure there are people who would have been an artist who aren't. I can't say I've seen attrition because again, we're such a small community that I think even with the, you know, it's there's still a lot of artists coming out of our community. Okay. And I think also if you're really like, again, I think art should be taught in school, not because I want everyone to be an artist. Like, don't get me wrong. Oh my God, I could not be an artist. My kid, by the way, wants to be an artist, of course. So again, I think it's great if you really have the calling, but I don't think everyone has the calling. And but I think it's great to do art. Like I think, you know, you should just doodle when you're on the phone. I mean, I don't think you have to be a great artist. I just think being connected to art is important. It doesn't have to be visual art. It can also be music or dance. I just think it's really important as a human being to have some connection to art. So but I think if you really are driven as an artist, I think you're going to find your way to it one way or another. You know, even if it's not taught in school. I mean, again, I know like we have, like you have art. I mean, you have Miss Lassie right there, right? We have Amos Ferguson. I mean, I think people come to art through other ways. But I do think it has a very large effect on society as a whole. That and I think the violence you see and the kind of, again, like I really feel like if everyone had to listen to music and do some dance and do some painting, I think everybody would be like have much better mental health, frankly.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you where I can ask you questions all night. So I've been in the field for quite some time, but I'll be quiet now.
No, that's okay. It's only us. I've got a few more minutes. It is my husband. My patient says my husband's birthday tonight, so they're waiting for me. I just got a text from him. I was like, honey, because I was sick last week, you know, I've got to do this thing tonight. He was like, damn. So, but he just texted me and he says, it's very nice. And they're waiting for me with a glass of wine. So it's fine.
Oh no, we should let you go.
No, but I said till 8:15. I said till 8:15. We've got
4 minutes.
Four more minutes.
All right. So Lynn, I've been asking all the questions. You have another question?
You know what, I think I don't really have a question. I guess just a comment, because I've kind of already been mulling a lot of how I'm going to progress, but a lot of the things that you said tonight were really, really powerful. And I think just getting in your, sharing your mindset, all of your formidable experience, but your mindset as well and how you think about art has really been helpful. You know, so easy to take things personally, like rejection, you know, all that, but just to think about just the approach that you recommended has been really, really helpful, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think very much so. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes saying, is there any gap? But, you know, I think I'm kind of just soaking it all in right now. But I did find that extra, you know, really gave me a new perspective, I think, on how to think about different organizations and then how you think about working with artists. But I love your comment at the end about going within and being true to that. We still need to always hear those messages.
Yeah. It's difficult because you get distracted by the market, right? And you think, oh, if I make this, it'll be better. But it really, you know, I think good art really comes from, again, somebody knowing themselves.
So I have a question about collectors. Collectors, correct me if I'm wrong, tend to be somewhat older than the artists in general. Maybe I'd be correct. Do you ever find collectors wanting more traditional work, yet younger artists are coming out of school with more of a more modern, maybe I'm into digital, there's nobody there to teach me how to paint the classical way, that sort of thing? Do you see a disconnect between what collectors would like and what new artists are producing?
Yes and no. I mean, I think there's always going to be people making, again, like traditional, let's call it traditional work, but I don't want to kind of make it sound less than. And they're great artists doing that. And I think there'll always be a market for that. I do think there is more kind of interest in contemporary art right now, and kind of like new ways of doing things, because again, we've just been looking at landscape painting for 200 years. So I think, it's just kind of like, oh, this is what's new. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's what's better. And I think also, again, as the art world has grown, there's lots of different art worlds. That's what I mean. So yes, like the art world that we read about in Art Forum is this very specific line of kind of, conceptual art and, what have you. But again, like I know artists that have amazing careers making like huge sculptures for roundabouts on freeways, and they're never going to maybe be in a museum, but they're making work and they're making money and they're happy because they're living in the country with their 15 dogs and their kids, and they're making these amazing sculptures. So again, you also have to decide, like, and there is a market as well for traditional art. It's not this market right now. It's not the Armory show. It's not Frieze magazine. It's not that, but there are people still, buying traditional painting or traditional style painting, whatever you want to call it. And there's lots of, but right now it's not what's hip. So it's not in that market, but it still exists. And there's still a lot of people wanting it and buying it. So you have to kind of find your niche.
Right.
And so yeah, it might be frustrating if you are a beautiful, again, let's say a beautiful landscape painter, that you might not be on the cover of Art Forum if that's your wish, but you can still have a great career. And there are still museums that specialize in those things too. So again, you have to like go find them, because the art world is so big now, and it's so broken off into different niches. And so I think, it's finding out which part you fit into with your work. And again, I think that can be very satisfying. So
thank you.
you're welcome.
Absolutely. Okay, well, there are no more questions right now. If you can think of anything else, shoot me an email and we'll see if we can help you. But thank you so much, Ms. Coulson, for being here tonight and taking time out of your special day.
Yeah, I know.
Appreciate it.
Okay, 21 years of marriage, it's all right.
Congratulations.
Gonna
Go
forgive
enjoy
me.
yourself.
Gonna forgive me.
And happy birthday to your husband.
Thank you.
I hope
Nice to meet you.
Yes,
I hope.
Nice to meet you also.
So actually, Natalie Urquhart is coming to the Bahamas tomorrow. So yeah. So I'm going to see her tomorrow. So hopefully I will come back to Cayman and maybe we can all meet in person sometime.
That would be lovely.
Sounds great.
Meanwhile,
Have a
definitely
great evening.
All
stay tuned for our next business
Thank
art
you.
session. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Night.
Have a
Bye
good
now.
evening. Bye.